Good morning. This is Mike Houston with your Wednesday morning weather hazard briefing for southeast Idaho. Looking at our key points, we fall between two storm systems today for a lull. We expect to see increasing winds across the region, or at least the central mountains and Arco Desert area on Thursday as a trough approaches from the north. In addition to that, we'll see a chance of thunderstorms across the southern mountains. Some of those may be fairly wet. And then as we work our way into Friday and Saturday, we expect our next push of monsoon moisture with numerous showers and thunderstorms across the region and cooler temperatures. By the early next week, we expect the ridge to reestablish itself in the Four Corners region, which will bring a return to above normal temperatures across the region. Let's get to the forecast charts here. Stopping at the weather risk outlook here, I only wanted to point out one thing here on Thursday. With the breezy winds expected to develop across the central mountains and marginal relative humidities up in the Lemhi country, we may see a chance for some sort of red flag highlights up there. Otherwise, you see a smattering of showers and thunderstorms throughout the week and running into the weekend. Looking at our forecast charts, here we see the high-pressure ridge across the southern states, fairly oriented west to east, so not a big flow of monsoon moisture to the north. Still see that stuff pooling down to our south here. You look further north, though, we do have a trough across western Canada and some lingering moisture across the region will bring us a slight chance of maybe some afternoon thunderstorms here, extending from Mackay on up through Dillon, Island Park, and down into the Caribous. Again, isolated in nature, so maybe a few cells floating around out there this afternoon. Otherwise, we'll see the bulk of the region remaining mostly dry. Temperatures running about normal this time of year. Here we are in the Snake River Plain with highs in the mid to upper 80s. You get up into the central mountains, generally run in the lower 80s to upper 80s here, and similar readings across the eastern highlands. Humidities on this chart here, maybe a little dry for my liking, but generally running in the 30s here across the south and eastern highlands. And then lower 20s to lower 30s here in the Snake River Plain, and then generally in the mid-teens to mid-20s here in the central mountains. As we advance to Thursday, we see that trough that was across western Canada now beginning to sink south and beginning to flex its muscles here across the Pacific Northwest states. We see quite a bit of wind beginning to develop aloft here across the central mountains, and now beginning to see the high-pressure ridge beginning to take a little better shape and shifting slightly towards the Four Corners region. That'll open the door for some moisture then to work north through the Great Basin into southern Idaho. And here we are looking at our best chance of precipitation on Thursday across the southern highlands. We'll take a look at another chart here in a second. But these storms down here should be fairly moist. Get further north, the character gets a little drier but more isolated with the best corridor for afternoon thunderstorm activity, basically extending from the Mackay region up into Dillon. Can't rule out an isolated cell across the rest of the region, which is why you see the rest of the forecast area here painted in a powder green color for slight chance of cells. As I mentioned, the south should be fairly wet. The Warning Prediction Center has highlighted this region for an excess of rain outlook. So, like I said, these storms, especially if they get going pretty good down here across the southern highlands, may produce some sort of flash flooding if we're watching to see how those develop. The other issue that I pointed out in the risk matrix earlier was the winds, and primarily across the central mountains and here the Arco Desert, where we'll have marginal humidity requirements for red flags. So I want to make sure that we all pay attention to that one. I'm not issuing anything on this particular shift, but maybe the day shift may think of what we might want to be doing with that, and then and we may see some highlights coming with that here shortly. Advancing to Friday, we begin to see that trough now beginning to extend into central Canada, so fairly broad trough. And this basically sets up here for Friday and Saturday, and we continue to see a fairly decent monsoon push across the region, which will help fuel numerous showers and scattered thunderstorms across. So most of these wet, of course. WPC, or the Warning Prediction Center, has all of our southeast mountains here again in an excessive rain outlook. So most of these will be fairly wet. I would say that even the ones further north will contain quite a bit of moisture with them. And humidity levels will likely be higher there. So I'm not anticipating any type of red flag events over the weekend just because of the elevated humidity levels. Once we advance to Monday, we begin to see the high-pressure ridge beginning to shift a little further westward into the Four Corners region. And we've seen a low-pressure system set up off the Northern California coast. So we'll continue to see this expansion of the ridge across the region. At this time, we don't see any monsoon moisture pushing north. It all seems to be pooling across the south here. But we will see an increase in temperatures across the region fairly notably, with highs here on Monday at least and into Tuesday running into the low to mid 90s here in the Snake River Plain, and mid 80s to lower 90s here in the Central Mountains and Eastern Highlands, with humidity levels then dropping down into the teens to lower 20s here in the Snake River Plain, and teens across the Central Mountains, and generally the 20s here across the Southeast Highlands. So to summarize, we will see a lull between storms today, and then increasing winds across the region, especially the Central Mountains and Arco Desert, on Thursday afternoon as a trough approaches from the north. In addition to that, we'll see some fairly focused monsoonal flow across the Southern Highlands, with some fairly wet thunderstorms in that region. And then on Friday and Saturday, our next monsoon push with numerous showers and thunderstorms across the region, things fairly moist, slight cool down with that. And then as we work our way into early next week, the upper ridge reestablishes itself near the Four Corners region, so we'll see temperatures beginning to run well above normal for that time frame with the drier conditions. That's all I had for you today. If you had any comments or questions or needed any assistance, please give us a call at the number on the screen. Thank you.